This is what Wheeler said.
And the reason I wanted to be here tonight was not to talk, but to listen.
But this is what Wheeler heard.
Resign now! Resign now!
And then this is what Wheeler saw. And the mayor, who could have been, makes it clear that he's glad he's not. And Jo Ann Hardesty wrongly claimed it wasn't protesters who set the Portland Police Union on fire. It was the police. And that didn't go over so well. Here's the story.
No, it did not. Hi, I'm Dan Haggerty. Welcome to The Story. We appreciate you being here. Let me just say to all the people who watch every night and write in every night, if you don't think that we're getting back to you soon enough when you talk to us, you're probably correct. Our inbox has been exploding with comments and questions, which I love, which really helps, I think, everything that we do here. But our staff has not grown at all, so it takes us a while to look through it all. But we are doing that, and we're using your input every single night to drive our coverage. So even if you don't see your question addressed here on air, your voice is helping us to right the ship. So keep it coming. Email us at thestory@kgw.com. You can find me on Facebook, where, again, we post a live stream of this show every single night there on my Facebook feed. And as always, keep using Twitter and the hashtag #HeyDan. Let's get to tonight's big story. It is a two-parter. It's about two Portland city leaders who have taken a much different approach, you could say, on the protests downtown over the past few weeks. We're, of course, talking about Mayor Ted Wheeler and Commissioner Jo Ann Hardesty. Now, Wheeler has been trying to walk this fine line by supporting both the protesters and the police bureau rank and file. After all, he is the police commissioner. And then we have Commissioner Hardesty. She spearheaded police reform in the aftermath of George Floyd's death and now wants to become police commissioner. Both of them are in hot water, or in the mayor's case, more like hot tear gas.
You've been doing that for 50 nights, Ted! There it is, Ted! You've been doing that for 50 nights!
That's something you don't see every day, the mayor getting tear gas. Yeah, the mayor showed up to a protest outside of the Justice Center last night for a listening session, and a few hours later joined those hundreds of protesters. But if you think getting gassed alongside them made Wheeler the protest hero, you are way off base, because in between the tear gas and the flashbangs, there were chants of F Ted Wheeler, tear gas Teddy, and demands for his resignation. This was not a friendly crowd to Wheeler on either side of the Justice Center fence. So on one hand, you've got protesters who are angry at him for not doing more to rein in Portland police, who used tear gas against protesters many times during the first weeks of these protests. He did later limit how police can use tear gas, and a court order also did the same thing. And now Portland police can only use tear gas if officers feel their lives are in danger. And to be fair, they say they haven't launched any gas in more than a week. The tear gas that you've been seeing on the news lately is coming from the feds, who don't fall under that judge's order. And while local protesters don't think the mayor is doing enough to temper police, the president, on the other hand, thinks Wheeler is being too easy on protesters.
And I'll tell you what, the governor and the mayor and the senators out there, they're afraid of these people. That's the reason they don't want us to help them. They're afraid. I really believe they're actually maybe even physically afraid of these people.
So, from the top down, we're talking about a man with very few allies. And nobody was more aware of that last night than the man who lost to Ted Wheeler back in 2016, Jules Bailey. He tweeted out last night, and it is our quote of the day. This is something else. Bailey said, quote, "Some days you feel like maybe things worked out for the better after all." So, let's talk specifics now. We hear from a lot of you write in kind of confused about what the specific goals of these protests are. And while it's impossible, I think, to account for all the different reasons that people have shown up downtown, we did see this. This is a projection against the Justice Center, and it was directed at Mayor Wheeler. It listed 4 specific demands. First, defund Portland police by half or more and invest that money into communities, specifically black communities. Second, release protesters from jail. Third, get the feds out of Portland. And fourth, resign. So Let's take a second and go through those. Wheeler has said that he won't resign, and he has no plans to hand over that role as police commissioner to anyone else, including Jo Ann Hardesty, who has said that she wants to take up the mantle. Also, to our knowledge, he hasn't addressed releasing protesters, but again, he has no authority over the federal arrests that we've seen. And as of the last budget vote, the city did cut about $15 million from PPB, but that's out of a budget of more than $200 million, so nowhere near half. And he has said flat out he is against abolishing police. As for getting the feds to leave Portland, Wheeler said that he's trying to put pressure on them with cable news appearances, but protesters told us last night that's not good enough for them.
So you're saying that tonight there is nothing you can do to protect these thousands of people around us immediately from the federal officers in our city? There's nothing immediately that you can do to protect us?
I think what we are doing tonight is actually the best thing we can do right now is be here, be heard, be unified, and be clear. We didn't want them. We didn't ask for them. They are not trained for what they are being asked to do, and we want them to leave.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So Wheeler gave this kind of speech of sorts to the protesters, and then he let them talk. You heard a bit of it right there. But this was the very first question that they asked him.
So, Mr. Wheeler, everyone in the crowd wants to know what you're going to do about qualified immunity. Go ahead and answer that.
I am opposed to qualified immunity. We're going to get rid of it. To do it, we have to work with our state legislature to do it. I'm 100% committed to getting rid of qualified immunity.
So you've probably heard that term, qualified immunity, a lot lately. But what exactly does it mean? Let's get technical here. According to Cornell Law School, qualified immunity protects a government official from lawsuits alleging that the official violated a plaintiff's rights, only allowing suits where officials violated a clearly established statutory or constitutional right. So basically, it protects police officers from being sued by victims in many cases. The law is supposed to act as a buffer for officers due to the dangerous nature of their job, but a lot of people think that it gets misinterpreted a lot, and it can actually let officers off the hook when they hurt people or even kill people. I talked to State Representative Marty Wilde about that.
There's this principle called qualified immunity, which started off harmlessly enough as a way of acknowledging that police officers aren't lawyers and they're not going to know how to anticipate every situation, but it's really grown out of control to give police officers immunity in such cases where, for instance, tragically, a police officer shot a child when he was intending to shoot a harmless dog, or giving a corrections officer immunity for pepper spraying an inmate. When asked for the reason, he said, "Because I felt like it." So those are situations where qualified immunity has really prevented officers from being held accountable for their conduct and making sure that that the victims had a fair share of compensation.
Marty Wilde is one of the lawmakers working on a proposed qualified immunity ban. He says the legislature could pass a law so officers cannot use qualified immunity as a defense in local or state courts. They could also try to make payouts more fair for victims. Right now there is this cap. It's at $769,000 in damages for injury or death lawsuits in local courts. And look, I know that sounds like a lot of money, but when you add up all of the legal costs and the medical expenses, the victim at the end of the whole thing isn't really left in many cases with that much. Oregon is also looking at Colorado's new law, which they passed last month. They're the first state in the country to end qualified immunity at the state level. The bill's prime sponsor says some sheriffs threatened to walk off the job in protest if it passed, but that hasn't happened. Instead, some officers with a history of misconduct allegations have resigned.
So I would say the bill is working as it's intended. It is removing some of those bad officers, but it's also bringing them to light because of the cooperation of the local law enforcement agencies who are actually publicizing what is going on in their departments and saying this person has left, and we believe it's because they have such a bad history of use of force and they shouldn't be here in the first place.
Now, under Colorado's law, police officers have to pay up to $25,000 out of pocket to the victims if they're found to have violated their constitutional rights. Here in Oregon, it would be different. Representative Wilde says that they're not considering that, where the officers would be financially liable.
The officers I've spoken to are primarily concerned about being hit with a judgment that they can't possibly afford. And I've kind of taken a step back and said, we know that you are not wealthy people. You are public servants. Where we're trying to go is not to take your money. Where we're trying to go is to get you to think twice about it and be deliberative in your use of force.
So here's how it would work in Oregon. He says instead, if an officer gets sued and a jury rules against them, they will be reported to a state agency that licenses officers, meaning that they could get their license suspended or revoked. Victims would still get damages, but that would continue to be paid by the city or police department. So when could we see a qualified immunity law passed? Well, lawmakers are working on more police reform proposals, including this one, right now. And we know the governor plans to call a special session this summer. So in the meantime, we'll keep you posted. We heard more today from one of the protesters who was out at the protest last night speaking to Mayor Wheeler. His name is Max Smith, and he says he felt like Mayor Wheeler understood what he was saying, but that he wasn't going to do anything about it. And he says that's exactly why he thinks people will continue to stay out there protesting.
If Ted would have said, you're right, Black lives do matter, we need to defund these police, take some money back from the cops, put money into programs to help people, this would be over. This would have been over a month ago where they signed all that stuff, but they didn't do it. So now here we are still protesting because we haven't got what we're asking for, despite the fact that we pay for it, right? And Ted is like, well, I don't know, maybe. I'm not going to commit to anything, but you know, in November, vote for me. So for us, that's not about us. That's what the problem is. Then Trump's coming in here because he wants to do this martial law thing and act, you know, it's for his election. None of this is being done to aid and abet anyone's election. Not for us. We're in the field because we need the cops to go home, stop harassing our communities, stop keeping us in jail, stop breaking our families up, stop incarcerating our fathers, stop incarcerating our mothers, stop incarcerating our children over small things, stop criminalizing our kids in middle school, in high school.
So we mentioned at the top that this was a two-part big story. Well, now we've come to the Jo Ann Hardesty portion. Throughout these protests, Commissioner Hardesty has been one of the most prominent local voices calling for police reform. She has been consistently and unapologetically critical of police, the feds, the tactics, all of it. But yesterday afternoon, a quote from her surfaced in Marie Claire magazine. During an interview about the protests, Hardesty said, "I believe Portland police is lying about the damage or starting the fires themselves so that they have justification for attacking community members." Now, hours later, Hardesty apologized and walked back her comments. She called them unfounded and even misinformation. She also addressed them today during a news conference and even got a little emotional, answering a question from our Maggie Vespa.
Minutes into Thursday's press conference, City Commissioner Jo Ann Hardesty said she expected questions about the Marie Claire quote and about her apology. I asked her why, 50-plus days into these protests, her emotions, as she put it, got the most of her.
As the first African-American woman on the City Council, as someone who has had to just kind of put my own personal feeling aside because I have a job to do, there's been a lot coming at me, right, nonstop.
Then the commissioner added she and her team went to a protest Saturday. Things were peaceful until she left. She said that's when officers started pushing back against protesters and using tear gas.
Knowing that people who work for me, that I love, could have been killed because of police action downtown that happened 10 minutes after I left. That was not by accident. And so carrying that in addition to everything else is what led to that. But I'm an adult, and when I'm wrong, I will say I'm wrong. And when an apology is needed, I will give one.
To that end, the commissioner says she's called Portland Police Chief Chuck Lavelle, who didn't answer. The chief yesterday tweeting Hardesty's comment was completely false. He added he was disappointed. Hardesty also said she had not called Portland Police Association President Daryl Turner, who in the last few weeks met with Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf and said he had no confidence the mayor or city council could stop the protests.
I'm just not ready to do it now, and I'll probably take the weekend and give him a call on Monday, assuming that things go well this weekend.
KGW reached out to Turner and the police union spokesperson. We haven't heard back. The comments come after the commissioner last week demanded Mayor and Police Commissioner Ted Wheeler give her control of Portland's police bureau.
If the mayor gave it to me tomorrow, my first order would be to demand that Portland police no longer show up at protests. That rather than show up at protests in riot gear, that they should just respond to 911 calls where a crime is being committed.
The mayor has since said he has no plans to turn over the Bureau. Last night, he stood with protesters even as they were tear-gassed by federal officers. Today, Hardesty was asked whether Wheeler is the right mayor for Portland in this time.
You know, he is who he is. He is a privileged white man who grew up among wealth and privilege. And so I don't know if he has what we need at this time. I can tell you that I have what we need to fundamentally change how policing happens in Portland, and would be fearless about changing it. So I'll just leave it there.
Maggie Vespa, KGW News.
Police brutality should not be the response to demonstrations about police brutality, period.
When the story continues, what Sarah Iannarone considers violent and what she doesn't.
I think F. Ted Wheeler. I think he needs to start doing something, showing up here saying that he's coming to protest and then has a big, what looked to be a press conference around him is disgusting. As police commissioner, he should have done more things to protect the people of Portland that elected him to get in that seat, to have such a position of power. It's come down to protecting a building, and it's ridiculous.
Welcome back. Keep reaching out, asking us your questions. Use that hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. Hey, yesterday I played a part of my interview with Sarah Iannarone. She is running to unseat Ted Wheeler as Portland's mayor, and she is unapologetic in her criticism of him in person and on Twitter. Tonight, I want to share some more from our conversation about the response to protests downtown.
Police brutality should not be the response to demonstrations about police brutality, period.
So we are still working on getting some one-on-one time with Mayor Wheeler. In the meantime, I interviewed Iannarone twice in 2 weeks. You might have noticed that was a little brief there. We didn't play a ton of it. Little Air Force here on air, but we have it all online. So I talked to her twice before and after the most recent spikes in protests downtown. Those interviews are up on the KGW YouTube channel if you want to go check them out. So something that we really need to talk about, I don't know if a ton of people know about Portland's commission style of government and what it really means, but it means that the four commissioners, who are not the mayor, they wield a ton of power in this city, which is why we've been paying so much attention to this race coming up in August. I talked with Loretta Smith and Dan Ryan separately about running to fill the seat of late Nick Fish on City Council, but Laurel Porter had them both on Straight Talk today at the same time, and the first thing that she asked about was the protest downtown and what they think needs to happen to find a solution.
Imagine waking up in the morning to find out that your mayor was tear gassed by federal officers. Everybody should be up in arms. So if they do that to a white male mayor, imagine what they're going to do to black and brown folks who are down there protesting peacefully. We have to stop this. We actually have to pass this police contract, and we need to make sure the federal officers are out of the way.
I think Portland's at a point where we're in a crisis. We need a peace summit, is what I think. I think, I grew up admiring Jimmy Carter and the work in the Middle East, and I think we need a Middle East type summit right here in Portland. I have a lot of skills in conflict negotiation. I think we need to have two people representative from different fractions of the protesters. We need two police. We need people from business, small business, the residents that are influenced by this, that live downtown, that live on Killingsworth and MLK and in North Portland, where I live by the police headquarters. We need to have this street response team make sure that they're de-escalated and that there's no cell phones in the meeting. I really do think we need to try a different approach.
All right, by the way, ballots for this special election were just mailed out yesterday, so check your mail if you haven't already. Election Day is August 11th, and I can't stress how important elections like this are at a time like this. And you can see that entire conversation on Straight Talk with Laurel Porter. That's tomorrow at 7 o'clock, Saturday at 4:30, and Sunday at 6:30 on KGW. All right, it's almost time to read some comments. Keep using that hashtag HeyDan. You can email us at thestory@kgw.com. We're going to finish things up when the story completes next.
Yes, we're out here for Black lives. and then all this other stuff happens. But so we have to deal with that. We have to deal with the fact that Trump is now involved in trying to change the narrative and make this a bigger thing about him. And we have to focus, because on the ground it's the same. For us down there, the feds coming in is really not much different than how we were getting treated before they came in, and we were fighting for, the defunding of police in support of Black lives.
Hey, so we were trying really hard to get the rest of that Sarah Iannarone interview up. There was a little technical error with our editing process, so we were trying to end the show with it tonight, squeeze it in. We couldn't do it in time. But again, I want to reiterate, that is all up online on the KGW YouTube channel. So I think you should check it out. It is important stuff. These are the people who are vying to be our leaders, and we really need to know who our leaders are right now. I want to read something from Luke Greenwald. Love the show. I used to be very adamant about watching Netflix at 6 p.m., but your show has taken over the time slot. You know what? Knowing the power of Netflix, that means a lot. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Brandon Bishop writing in saying, hey, Dan, is it possible to have a third candidate for the mayor race in Portland? It is. You could have a write-in candidate, but as far as the candidates that are going to be on the ballot, so printed on the ballot when you get it, it's only going to say Mayor Ted Wheeler or Ted Wheeler, and it's going to say Sarah Iannarone. You can write somebody in if you'd like. I know that there have been some rumblings of candidates looking to run as write-in candidates, but for now, those are the only two names you're going to see. And then Sean asked to the story and said, hey, Dan, how many times do you think you've said, hey, Dan? Tonight or in general? There's actually, somebody told me there's a drinking game. So I try to be gentle with it each night because, I want people to make it all the way through the show. Thanks for being with us. I appreciate it as always. We got the news at 6:30 with Laurel Porter coming up next. This is the story. Again, you guys drive the content here. Everything you send in, when you use that hashtag HeyDan, lets us know what you think we should be pursuing, covering, and asking questions about to our leaders and the people who are in charge around here, which in reality is you. So let your voice be heard. We'll be your advocate, and let's do our best. That's it for tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
How long do you think this all goes on for out here?
Unfortunately, we could be out here the next 60 days or the next 600 days. We're dealing with a city that does not like the fact that we're standing up for Black voices and Black lives. And I don't think we'll see the end of it anytime soon.